right. Welcome back to Tech on Ice. Hope you've had a great last few days. Um, so, to continue the trend of talking about AI and where we're at with all of this interesting LLM slash SLM AI space, I want to talk about something that's pretty topical in the news. So, recording this endish of January 2025. 2025. Wow, end of January. It's crazy. Um, you know, this DeepSeek thing. So I want to talk a little bit about, at least from my reading of it, what it is, what it does to the overall market slash industry of this area segment of this industry. So a little bit of background: DeepSeek, it's a Chinese-based AI research company or firm, startup, whatever you want to call it. It's funded by like a hedge fund in China um, called High Flyer. It's been around for a few years, as most of these companies have been, but it got notable visibility because it released a new model a few days ago. And that model, DeepSeek, uh, it let's just say that it does some things that are different than, I guess, these more frontier traditional LLM models we've been seeing over the last few years. The Chat GPT or the GPT models, the Gemini models, the so on and so forth, right? Like the Sonnet models, the models you think like, oh, LLM, like those are the ones. It does it differently because it doesn't rely as heavily on the idea of using neural networks, um, which yeah, we've talked about really briefly, but neural networks is basically a way to go about placing data and moving data around that makes reasoning and contextual finding of words a bit sim- similar, but not the exact same as the human brain does. Anyway, there's a whole lot to talk about neural networks, and I probably should do like a video on it as I learn more. But it doesn't use neural networks, um, at least the same way that these other models do. It also doesn't use as many GPUs to train the model, which we, as we talked about, like that's the expensive part of running these models is training the data. Um, so with that, you're like, okay, so it probably isn't as good as some of these models. Well, come to find out, it in certain scenarios is as good as like the GPT like 4.0 models, which you think about it is crazy that it's something that uh, runs with less compute and something that doesn't use the same process is at par or in some situations better. But here's the craziest part: they open source everything. So they open source the model, they open source the white paper for the model. And what does this mean? Firstly, if you are Meta, or if you're Mistral, or if you're another group that's making these like open source language models, or the SLMs or lightweight LLMs, you need to be a bit worried, I think, because a competitor just showed up and said, we're doing this better and we're doing it cheaper, and here's how we did it. Sure, like the big tech companies that are providing these models are going to read that white paper and figure out how they're doing it. Like that's just how competitive nature and how industry works. But DeepSeek has proven that like you don't need to spend tens of millions of dollars on tuning models. They figured out how to get valid results in certain scenarios without doing that. I think I saw the number was around, it took the cost about $5 million. That's the number, or less than 6 million, which comparatively to tens of millions is it's crazy. So what does this also mean for like the rest of tech? If you are a provider of models, aka you license the models and then you make them available to companies, say the Microsofts or the Googles of the world, you're probably stoked because you just now have a model option that is cheaper to run, that is cheaper to train, that gives good results to your customers. So you can charge less for that model and theoretically you can make more money off of that model. And we'll see where that goes. Secondly, if you're the GPT, the open AIs or the Anthropics of the world, you're like, okay, we have a competitor that is doing things more efficiently than us. How do we react? And then finally, one thing that's interesting is that DeepSeek signed a deal with AMD for hardware stuff. People have been speculating as to like, oh, what does this mean for NVIDIA? I think this is good for NVIDIA too, because all that's going to do, the demand of DeepSeek, is going to require the demand for more GPUs. And who do you think supplies most of these GPUs? I know AMD is in this space too, but listen, it's NVIDIA. So I think in general, the only thing that DeepSeek really affects negatively, in my opinion, at least in the near term, is Meta. That, and I could be completely wrong, and please comment down below if you think I'm wrong. Meta will react, and I think it'll be fine. But initially, it's like, okay, so Olama was kind of, you know, king of the hill, so to speak, of these open source small language models. Not anymore. DeepSeek's here, and we'll see how the entire industry adjusts, because it's now shown that you can do things a bit differently and be a bit more nimble and require less hardware and less computing, and you can have the same results. So all these conversations we've been having about the cost of running these data centers and the cost of doing these things, like, it's still there, but there might be a new approach on the horizon that was just introduced that could drastically change how we think about how all this stuff works. So that's just based on my reading of it. I played around with it very, very lightly, DeepSeek. I'm going to drill into it more this week because I'm fascinated as to how it produces, or how it goes up against, for my use cases, against some of the more frontier models and even some SLMs that I trust. So that's it. That's all I got. Comment down below, like, if you tried DeepSeek yet or you're curious about it. Obviously, there's tons of questions about, like, oh, well, it's from China, so that's China. That's so bad, right? Um, Also, it's like, how are they able to do this? I would love to kind of hear people's thoughts on it down below. Chat, comment, let me know if we want to continue down this path of exploring what DeepSeek is actually doing to enable these things. I read into it lightly, but I'm not educated enough to talk about it at this point. Um, but yeah, I'd like to know what you folks think. So comment down below, like, subscribe, share with your friends. And as always, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.